In my church, I met this guy, and he was 19, so he was not a minor, which is most typical. But he was younger than a lot of child brides end up with their, quote husbands. We met in our church, and we were allowed to date. And I started dating him when I was 13, and we were engaged 6 weeks later and married 6 months after that. I got married the day that I should have graduated 8th grade.
Well, say that again, please, slower, because that hit me like a Mike Tyson right hook in 1985. So you got married.
The day I should have graduated 8th grade. I wore my 8th grade graduation dress to my wedding.
Okay. So now, man, I mean, but was that normal back then, though? And
No.
and what years was this? What years was this?
This was 1977.
Oh, I think that was the year like Kiss Alive 2 came out, I think. I mean, that's how I go through years. So here I'm thinking you're going to say like 50s or 60s, but 1977, the year you should have graduated 8th grade, you're wearing the dress to your wedding. Did you guys get married at a courthouse or a Chuck E. Cheese? Where did you get married?
I hate Chuck E. Cheese.
I know why. Now I know why. I hate that goddamn rat. Okay.
We lived in Indiana, and we tried to get married here, but the state wouldn't allow a 14-year-old to get married, even with judicial approval, which my minister at the time tried to get judicial approval from a judge that he knew. And thankfully, the judge had enough sense to say no. So my mom took me to Kentucky, back to Harlan, where we were from, and we went there, and she signed for me to get married. Now, the piece of that is you were supposed to have to be a resident of Kentucky to do this, but my mom gave her sister's address. They didn't check anything back then.
One of the other 9?
Yeah, yes. And so they gave me the license in Kentucky, and we got married in the pastor's living room that married my parents. He was very old. To say this man was old is an understatement.
It was him and Jesus.
It was him and Jesus.
You were on a double date.
That was our witness, was Jesus.
It was him and Jesus. Jesus like, hey man, listen, can you buy me some beer?
Yeah. He's thinking like this might not be a good idea. And the wedding was very interesting.
What was the wedding like? Was there a punch?
No. So here I stand
Lucky Charms cereal.
in my 8th grade maxi dress. And no, have you seen the scene? I think it was Ever After, the movie Ever After. Drew Barrymore, she played like a Cinderella character.
Okay.
And they're standing in the prince that she loves is going to be in an arranged marriage. So they're up there getting married, him and this other princess, not her. And the princess doesn't want to marry him because she's in love with someone else also. And so this princess she's sobbing at the wedding. She's just sobbing and sobbing. And finally they stop the wedding, and they, it all ends well because it's fairy tale. Well, mine, not so much.
Yeah.
So I'm sobbing. I was sobbing through the whole wedding. Like my cousin who stood up with me, she was the only one that she was only like 16 or 17. She was already married. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I couldn't even say.
Now, were you sobbing because you were upset or?
Yeah, I was upset. There was a lot of things that went on behind the scene. It was not a forced marriage, but I would say manipulation and coercion for sure on his part, not my family. But once we went and said, we want to get married, and my parents said that I could, it's like the ball started rolling, and I kind of lost control of the whole thing. And I never felt like I could go and say, look, hey, I don't want to do this. I can't do this, because I was a girl in a very, conservative family, very religious family. And my only reason to exist in the eyes of this culture was to be married and have kids. So in my eyes, this was what I was destined to do, and I didn't really have a choice, even though And I was considered safe at this point because I wasn't going to get pregnant. I wasn't going to go out and get in any kind of trouble because I was going to be married, and that's what I was only supposed to do anyway. So, and I did try to break it off a few times with him through the 6-month, in quote, engagement.
How did you try to break it off, though?
I just told him I would go to school to 8th grade, and my friends and my teachers would be like, why would you do this? You're barely 14. You can't get married? Like, you're too young. And my friends would be like, we're going to go to high school and we're going to go to ball games and have fun. And I would be like, yeah, I don't want to get married. And then I would go to him and say, look, I don't want to get married. And he would cry and he would threaten to kill himself and beg and be like, you have to do this. We have to get married now. And I felt a lot of guilt. Very transparent here. We were no sex before marriage.
But did y'all?
We did not.
Did y'all even kiss?
We kissed, and the thing that I felt like I was bound to him that I had to marry him was because I let him touch me under my clothes.
Oh, I mean, was it heavy petting as they called it back in the day?
Not really. More second base.
like you touched your boob?
Yeah.
Like he grabbed you like this?
Yeah.
Like this or?
But in my mind,
that was
I
a
was
sin.
soiled.
Wow, really?
And yes. And so because I was bound to him because of that contact. And that's how I was taught, is if you let a boy touch you, then that was, you were no longer pure. And it was just an offshoot of that purity culture that became so devastating later, even in the 90s and 2000s. We dealt with that even in the conservative church, of that purity culture, that girls are tainted once they're, sexually active, especially, but in my case, even any kind of sexual contact like that.
Now, when you guys went out, were you supervised at all, or chaperoned, or what did dates consider when you guys went out and dated or whatever? You being that age, I mean, was there parents around you guys? Did you ride bikes? I mean, what was the situation?
Well, he was 19, so he had a car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We went to movies and, just normal, mostly to the movies.
And no one thought anything?
No, surprisingly not. I think people probably in the church we attended when we moved here, there might have been people that I didn't know about that had reservations about it, because they were not from Appalachia, and this was not normal to them. But to my huge family, for the most part, it was just culturally, in their minds, it was culturally normal.
So when did you start? I mean, so the ceremony went and you were sobbing, crying. When did you it hit I want out? When did you go, I really want out? You can't, you're suffering. You're suffocated. You know what I mean?
Off and on I was married 14 years to him, and it off and on over the whole time. A few times early on, we moved away from the street that I was raised on in Indianapolis on the west side. And that was the first time I'd ever been literally out of the presence of my family, because we had always just lived, like I said, almost communally. I mean, we didn't know whose kids were who. We all took care of each other.
Right.
We drove each other's cars. There was we had no boundaries.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No personal space. And so we moved several miles away, which meant I was very isolated because I couldn't drive and I had no way to get anywhere. So regret set in, and I didn't identify it as regret, I guess, at the time. Fear, terror, overwhelming fear and loneliness. And, I was running a household basically at 14 years old, away from my family for the first time.
Running a household at 14.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when there's a lot of people around that, like you said, basically, that community helps raise a family, whatever Hillary Clinton said, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's true. But when you're away from that, and then it's just you and your husband, to me, that's when reality sets
Yes.
in. And that's why sometimes, like, people, they meet in high school or college or whatever the situation is in a group. It's almost a gift and a curse. You meet them and you're having a good time. But when, like, say you have to move away and it's just you two together, that's when you find out, do I really like this person? You know what I mean? So did that set in? Like, I don't know if I really love him, or did that set in at all?
Oh yeah, yeah, it did. It did, but in the same religion, there's no divorce. Divorce was not allowed, so that didn't ever enter my mind that was a possibility to get out. So I had to make the best of it and accept the situation. And I didn't even have a telephone, so I couldn't even call anybody. We couldn't afford a phone.
Did you feel trapped?
Yeah, a little bit.
But back in those days, it's like, I'm trying to look back in my day and trying to, figure out like how it was back then. We had phone, we had the rotary dial, and we may, if we were lucky, you had an answer machine. But I think that came maybe later. So, like, in situations like that, did you guys get along, or did he become abusive, or did you ever talk back? What was that situation like?
He did not become abusive. He never became physically abusive. But like I said earlier, he was manipulative, and he was the man of the house. I was raised very, patriarchal. The man's the head of the house. The most people's view, a lot of conservative people's view of biblical hierarchy of man, then God, then man, then woman. That was very, very much the case. So what he said go. I've always had a mouth on me.
No. You? No.
So I don't know about talking back, but I definitely, I was not the person then that I am now. And I had to, make myself smaller, and shrink to fit that submissive wife role. And I did that.
Really? Mm-hmm. Did you feel like a caged lion, though? Honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the older I got, the worse it got. But you asked earlier when I realized that I really wanted out was really not until later in my 20s. I never went to high school, not a day. He had to go withdraw me from high school because he became my guardian, because my parents signed me up. That's what happens in child marriage that people don't understand, is it's really a guardianship situation, because when I got married, I was a minor. So he became my guardian.
He's your husband and your guardian.
Well, yeah. And he had to sign to withdraw me from high school, because I got a truancy letter because I didn't go to high school, and he had to go and we had to talk to the principal, and at Ben Davis High School is where I should have went. And he had to go and sign for me to be withdrawn, and they approved it because I was married, and he was my guardian, and no further education was required. So I didn't go to high school, but then I always had a burning desire to have an education. So I had a baby at 15, miscarriage at 17, baby at 18, and a baby at 22.
Oh, my God.
And he had to sign for me to get prenatal care for my first child, my daughter, because he was my guardian. I could not even seek medical care without his consent. He had to sign for my driver's license. I couldn't get a driver's license without his consent.
You were essentially helpless in a way.
Child marriage renders the child helpless. Like, that's a good word, because people don't realize the rights that they don't have as a child. Here you are in this situation, and you can't can't even get a divorce. I could not have filed for divorce as a minor. Minors can't go to a domestic violence shelter.
So even if you wanted to file for divorce, would he have to sign for it? Would he have to?
I'm not even 100% sure how that would work, but a minor cannot exact legal action.
Yeah. Wow.
Like that. So, it's like once you're married as a minor, that you're stuck until you're 18, no matter what. Unless,
oh my God.
And it's used in that sense a lot to trap, especially girls. in a guardianship situation.
Now, you say you always had a burning desire for education.
Yes.
Now, did you like sneak education in, kind of like slaves did back in the day? They learn how to read, or instead of like, going out drinking, you would like get a book and go, I gotta read this. I mean, it's seriously, because when people really, really, really want something, they find a way to do it. So
Yes.
is that what you did?
I did read a lot, and I still read a lot.
And then that was back before the internet and anything. So how did you do it? I mean, did you?
Walk to the library.
Okay.
I did walk to the library.
God, I love libraries. Aren't
I
they the
do too.
best?
They're
They're
the
so
best.
underrated.
Oh my gosh, it's a lifeline for so many people.
Libraries are underrated. They actually are the heartbeat of society and definitely a community. What a library does, that knowledge of learning, it can't be understated what a
Right.
library does.
Yep.
So you walk there and you read all day and then
I'd
go back
get
and clean the
books
house.
And, I would take them home, or I would ask my husband to buy me a magazine every now and then
What would-
because I
what'd you
had
get?
no control
Like
over.
what would you get? Like 17?
Yeah,
Really? Like Teen Beat?
Good housekeeping. I was trying to learn, and I was taught that most of that stuff was pretty bad. I didn't do the teen magazines. No, I didn't, because
yeah.
in our religion, it wasn't okay to read that stuff. So I had to be super careful. But
He wouldn't want you to know about the Bay City Rollers or anything like that.
right, which I did love.
Who didn't love the Bay City Rollers? SATUYDA. Not you go. I can't go out on Saturday night, but I like the song.
Right,
You-
exactly.
You couldn't go out unless your husband wrote.
It wrote me a permission slip.
Hello, officer. This is from my husband. He said I can go out
Right. I didn't have any way to get there. I'd have had to walk or ride my bicycle.
or take a bus. I know you ride your bike to the club.
I was too young to get in. I could be married, but I couldn't go to the club.
Whose tricycle's out front? That would be mine. Okay. So now, when is it getting to the point where you just you can't take it anymore?
So when my youngest was a couple years old, I went and got my GED. And even back like in 8th grade, I was a straight A student. I went and got my GED. And then when he went to kindergarten, I went to college. And when I went to college, it was like, I can't explain what that opened up in me. And then I realized the contrast of my life and life outside of that. And
That must have blew you away.
That's when I was like, this is not what I want. Like, this is not what I would have chosen for myself.
What college did you go to?
I started at IUPUI.
Okay.
And then I ended up graduating from Ball State in medical imaging.
My God. So that honestly, that is almost like, it's literally like night and day.
It was absolutely. Like, when I walked onto that campus the first day, number one, I was terrified.
Of course.
Terrified.
You're around black people for the first time?
I was, yeah.
I mean, seriously,
Well,
like, oh my God, they're free.
I was actually around. No, I went to school. I was in the busing, situation.
That's right,
So
that's
in
right.
5th grade, I went to, I got bused into a, more diverse school. So
Okay.
that wasn't a shocker to me at all. But because I had been told, I'd been taught that anybody outside of our church or, religion and all that were bad and wrong, and it was scary. The world was scary, and, they were going to, lead you astray. And,
Right.
there was just a lot of fear embedded in my upbringing.
Of course.
And there isn't a lot of religion. And then I got into college and I realized that, these people are nice. These people are so welcoming to me, and people are very helpful. And it really, I just can't explain how eye-opening it was. And that's when I really knew how unhappy I was in that marriage, because I hadn't known anything else. And when it's like a caged animal doesn't know it's caged.